Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications. The following interactive performance is a second-round entry in Chilling Tales for Dark Nights 2025 Evil Idol Voice Acting Competition. And you, listener, get to help decide who advances to round 3. Voting is simple. Following the performance, simply click the thumbs up icon on this video if you'd like this contestant to move forward, or the thumbs down if you'd like to see them be eliminated. Voting on this entry will conclude 1 week after the date of its posting. Thank you, and good luck to all of our contestants.
Tell me, how does it end? Again the demand. Into the cherished sanctuary of her small, ivy-covered cottage had come this troublesome trio, breaking through the door, locks and laws be damned, clad in costumes of pantyhose masks and black outfits, bringing mean eyes, the reek of potential bloodshed, and this, war cry and mating call in one. Their stated ransom, an abiding central obsession, the repeated demand. Tell me, old lady, how does it end? The one talking, a very large man, biggest of the three by far, loomed over her, brandishing a long, thick flashlight. The Freudian implications nearly made her giggle, something she'd not done in decades. Instead, Charlotte Elizabeth Hopkins, reigning grand dame of epic fantasy fiction, an authentic living legend at the venerable age of 89, unquestioned successor to the throne of Tolkien, and recipient of, among many additional accolades, an unprecedented 2 separate Lifetime Achievement Awards from the International Fabulists Association, and who had been awarded a National Medal of the Arts, and twice named a finalist for the Nobel Prize in Literature, stuck her wine-stained tongue between her dour lips, and blew a resounding raspberry. In the seemingly endless moment of ensuing silence, the 2 intruders she could see, the third having slinked off behind her somewhere, exchanged gobsmacked looks. The big man's shoulders slumped, and, Charlotte noted with some delight, even his flashlight seemed to wilt as he exclaimed, "What the absolute fuck?" The shorter one, a thin, twitchy young man skulking in the corner near Charlotte's ancient boxy television, which hadn't worked since before Bush was president, the first Bush, might I add, let loose a tittering laugh. Granny's got balls. Gotta give her that, Billy. Shut up. The big one halfway turned and threw up his hands. I said no names, moron. In fact, I'm pretty sure I said no words from you at all. You're the lookout, right? So get your eyes back to that window and look out. Facing Charlotte, he smacked the flashlight against his palm. Lady, just tell me how your next book ends and we're gone, okay? All of this? He gestured to his mask and the plain black sweatshirt. We're doing this for you, get it? If you can't identify us, there's no reason you have to get hurt, alright? Please, just answer the question and let's all get on with our lives. Now, give it up. How does... What's it called again?
A Symphony of Swords,
said the skinny one. Right. How does a Symphony of Swords end? Here again, the demand. And finally, Charlotte knew she must answer and speak the truth she'd been so reluctant to admit even to herself. Slowly, but without a single tremble, she reached out to select a slim cigar from the golden box on her desk. The golden box, a gift from a long-ago lover, the rebellious son of an oil sheik. Clenching the plastic tip of the Black and Mild in her crooked yellow teeth and flicking open her Zippo, Charlotte calmly and confidently confessed.
Do you know, I haven't the faintest idea.
Arms crossed, she rocked back in her rickety chair. She'd been sat at her desk when the trespassers burst in, sitting as she did nearly every night in front of her typewriter, fresh sheet of paper in place, awaiting input from her ever-increasingly reluctant muse. With the first 2 of the evening's customarily large glasses of Merlot already under her belt, so to speak, Charlotte had been too stunned at their sudden appearance to call the police, even if she had got a phone, which she most certainly did not. Her nearest neighbours were 3 miles away. Her cottage was shielded from view of the closest road by a dense swathe of trees. The situation was doomed to play out uninterrupted. The one called Billy sighed theatrically.
No dice, old lady. I'm warning you. If you don't...
And the threat continued. But Charlotte barely heard. She really didn't need to, feeling certain these unexpected and unwelcome guests were incapable of any originality whatsoever, or further surprise beyond the act of their arrival. The whole scenario was so trite, so hopelessly pulp, like something out of a sordid little Stephen King story, she thought. Where was John D. MacDonald when you needed him? Or better yet, Patricia Highsmith. Both were dead, of course, like so many of the others. Charlotte shifted her aged bones and wondered again how she'd so far remained exempt. Maybe my time's come at last, she considered. It wasn't an overly distressing possibility.
Are you listening to me?
Billy punctuated the question with another slap of the flashlight against his palm.
Do you understand what's happening right now?
Oh, I understand perfectly, young man.
Charlotte puffed her cigar and looked Billy over with narrowed eyes.
You're going to make me an offer I simply cannot refuse, or some such nonsense. And if I don't, play ball, as you say, I'll find myself in a subject to vague and unspecified but nonetheless devastating acts of bodily harm. Is that summary accurate?
The boy in the corner laughed again.
Ugh, this old woman,
Billy muttered.
Yes, lady, that's accurate. And you better believe I mean it. Now, tell me how the series ends.
Oh, I can see you're quite serious. And your uninvited presence here this evening certainly proves your resolve. But I need you to believe me when I say I've got no idea how the River of Time's meaning will conclude. Nor even if Symphony of Swords will in fact be the final book in the series. Now, Billy, do you understand me? It's simply not up to me.
Bullshit.
Billy gestured around the shabby cottage. The living room crammed so full of books as to be nearly inaccessible, and the lumpy sofa Charlotte used as a bed, having long since become too old to access the tiny bedroom at the top of the steep narrow stairs, the dingy kitchen beyond, where the third intruder likely lurked.
Who the hell else would it be up to?
Charlotte smoked and rocked in her chair, saying finally, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world,
My muse.
The strike to the back of her head was hard, but oddly restrained, as if her attacker wanted Charlotte to understand how much worse it could, and likely soon would be. The cigar fell to her lap, singeing her fraying cardigan.
I think that's quite enough of all this silliness.
The voice was soft, but cold, with a friendly drawl and a subdued edge, a switchblade held in a mittened hand. From behind Charlotte, as she massaged her scalp and retrieved the smouldering cigar from her lap, walked the third invader, casually slipping out of her bulky leather jacket to reveal a surprisingly athletically built and well-endowed woman of about 40, wearing tight jeans and a black t-shirt. She leaned against Charlotte's desk and slowly pulled the hose from her head, mussing short hair the colour of blood on fresh asphalt, in a devil-may-care manner.
Let's understand one another, Mrs. Hopkins.
She smiled politely below eyes so darkly brown as to seem black in the gloom of the grimy, cluttered cottage.
My name's Shelby, and I don't care if you're alive when we leave here tonight. If you think old Billy won't kill you easy as pie, if I say, you're not one half as smart as all them la-di-da critics seem to think. He ain't exactly the sharpest knife in the drawer, I'll grant you that, but he's real good with his hands, and I give him plenty of reasons to be awful fond of me. But see, it's not really him that needs to be convinced you ain't fibbing. It's me that brought us here, and it's me that needs to know the ending of your book. So, what do you say?
Charlotte relit her cigar, and with the tip clasped in her teeth said,
But I can't give you what I haven't got.
Shelby laughed, throwing her head back lightly.
Let's see now. Your first book, An Harsh and Deadly Gambit, was published in 1996. It took you just 2 years to put out the next one, Feeling Colossus, and only 2 short years after that to release Bloody Are the Chosen. Granted, the next took you 5 years to release. That was A Song of Love and Loss, that was. Then 6 more years went by before the last one, I Dreamed Crusades. A publishing phenomenon, that one. It sold something like 1 billion copies. I hear they got quite the cast lined up for the film too. It seems to me you've been slowing up for a while. But with the television series and announcement of the movie, the world was content to wait. And wait. And wait. But see, I simply cannot wait any more.
She slid her hands into the rear pockets of her jeans.
Now, maybe you ain't exactly got it all written out nice and neat at this very minute, but I refuse to believe after so many years of promising your readers the final book, and pushing the release date again and again, while supposedly slaving away this whole time, you can't at least give me the gist of how it ends. I mean, what else have you been doing with all this time?
She looked disdainfully around the cabin, then considered Charlotte herself.
Sure as anything a famous reclusive genius like yourself ain't been out enjoying all her money. And do pardon me, but you're just too old to get up to much else. So, tell us the big secret and we'll go on our way and leave you in peace, instead of pieces.
Charlotte barely bat an eye.
Oh, it's always nice to meet a reader.
She didn't quite laugh, but something like a chortle escaped her ancient throat.
Oh, truly, you're never too old to be surprised. I've got you to thank for that, madam. An important lesson, one I'd just about forgotten. I've lost something of a bet with myself about what you 3 are capable of. You, young lady, at least have proven delightfully surprising, and I'm not often mistaken these days. Oh, believe me, I'd love nothing more than to give you what you want, if for no other reason than to thank you for this unexpectedly enlightening experience, and possibly to actually avoid any unnecessary violence. But alas, I meant what I said. I haven't the foggiest idea how the story ends.
Shelby leaned closer, still smiling sweet as syrup.
Are you sure about that?
Charlotte nodded, crushing out her cigar in an ornate crystal ashtray. Another gift from yet another paramour from yesteryear. This one a mercurial Italian artist.
Oh, I wish it were otherwise. I really truly do.
In the corner, a crash. Everyone jumped, even cool as cucumber Shelby. Their heads snapped over their shoulders.
Sorry,
mumbled the twitchy boy, bending to pick up the pieces of the shattered snow globe. This a gift from the celebrity son of a prominent Republican congressman. Charlotte had attempted to date both father and son simultaneously for a brief time in the 1960s, and had shockingly mixed success. Shelby tutted loudly with fists planted on her hips as she slowly shook her head.
Didn't I say not to touch nothing? Didn't I tell you? Honestly, Robbie.
She turned back to Charlotte.
I apologise about your knick-knack, Mrs. Hopkins. That's Robert, my youngest. I got an older one too. His name's Thomas. Thomas Walker Lee. I'll just go ahead and level with you now, since it seems we're past being coy here tonight. Maybe you recognise his name.
The old woman shook her head dismissively.
Well, fact is, my Tommy's famous. He got his picture in all the papers. Sadly, his lawyers are saying we've finally run out of appeals for good. My beautiful boy's going to meet his daddy real soon. Too soon. And a lot of mean folks are saying just the most terrible things about him. Can you believe that? Never mind all those girls. They were all nasty little tramps, and the things he'd done to them weren't fully his fault on account of all the drugs. Them newspaper reporters, bunch of snot-nosed, smarty-pant writers just like you. They don't care about the truth. Seeing all those stories about himself, well, it's upsetting my baby. And that just don't seem fair since he ain't got a whole lot of time left. You understand?
Charlotte reached for another cigar and grunted.
I can see you're wondering what any of this has got to do with you.
Shelby snatched up the Zippo and flicked it alive, holding it out to light Charlotte's smoke.
That's fair enough, and I'm getting to it, I promise. See, when my boys were growing up, I wasn't exactly the best mother.
Charlotte, unsurprised, entertained some decidedly unkind thoughts about this woman who'd broken into her home, and as if reading the old woman's mind, Shelby's face hardened as she snapped close the lighter.
Don't judge me too hard, Mrs. Hopkins. I made some mistakes, but I'm right with Jesus now. I have forgiven myself, and so has he.
Shelby's eyes gleamed dangerously.
Ain't nothing I can do that he won't forgive.
She stood and began wandering about the living room, running a finger across the spines of the books on Charlotte's shelves, sending a trail of dust to dance towards the floor in her wake.
As I said, I wasn't the world's best mom. I was just too permissive with my boys. Let them run wild and raise all kinds of hell.
She shot a withering glance at Robert.
It ruined them in a way. Made them weak. Weak for drugs and drink and fast women. Trouble was bound to find them. You know, I think greatness requires a firmer hand. Don't you agree, Mrs. Hopkins?
Shelby reached out to pat Robert's head, making him flinch.
But while I might have been a lousy mother back then, there's at least one thing I can do for my Tommy now. 12-steppers might call it making amends. You see, throughout his time in prison, during the many failed appeals, and while seeing all those horrific stories about himself in the papers, one thing never failed to bring my son a bit of joy. That bloody book series of yours. Do not ask me why. Tommy never was a big reader as I recall. but he sure does love them thick-as Bible books of yours. Dragons and elves, magic swords and all that make-believe crap. He loves it. Fact is, he wrote me a letter just the other day.
Know what he said?
He said the thing that upsets him the most is that he'll never get to read a symphony of swords. Because he ain't got much time left and you don't seem to be in a big hurry to get it done. I thought I'd come by and see if you might do this little favour for my Tommy. I'd say he's just about your biggest fan in the whole wide world, Mrs. Hopkins. Why don't you tell me how it ends so I can make my baby happy?
Shelby returned to standing before the desk, grinning.
Or I can let Billy play with you a little bit first.
The big man loudly cracked his knuckles as Charlotte leaned forward, resting elbows on her knees, and with slow and inexorable deliberation, she shook her head.
So, you're saying it's up to this muse of yours, is it?
That is unfortunately the truth of the matter, yes.
Shelby shrugged and turned to her muscular acquaintance.
Well, Billy, guess we ought to just shuffle on home. Seems we're bothering the wrong person here. I mean, sure, she cashes the big checks and accepts the awards for all that fancy writing, but the ending is up to the muse. How silly of us.
It's silly, all right. Billy nodded, eyes fixed on Charlotte. Shelby strolled behind the author, putting her hands firmly on the old woman's shoulders, and squeezed.
Don't suppose we could maybe talk this matter over with this creative genius you've told us so much about?
Charlotte squirmed as Shelby's fingers dug painfully into her arthritic bones.
Maybe if Billy here beats on you badly enough, this muse of yours will just show up. What do you think, Mrs. Hopkins? May I pretty please speak with your muse?
You can try.
Charlotte winced.
Perhaps you'll have better luck with her than I have. She's locked in the basement.
Shelby relaxed her hold.
Come again? I said she is locked in the basement. That's where I keep the lazy, ungrateful brat.
Shelby slowly spun Charlotte's chair around and bent to bring her nose close to the writer's.
Are you messing with us, old woman? Is this one of them crazy artist things? What they call being an eccentric?
Oh, how I'd love that to be true.
The old woman's voice contained bone-deep weariness.
I'll prove it if you like. You can see for yourselves.
Shelby pulled from her pocket a small black handle from which, with the flick of her wrist and a quick metallic snap, extended a thin silver blade. She whispered,
If you're trying to trick me, I will slit your lying wrinkled throat.
Charlotte was honestly surprised at the strange mix of feelings that welled up inside her then, ripping through the distracting aches in her aged joints and muscles, years of self-imposed isolation while diligently soaking her body and brain in wine. She was, despite it all and regardless of her mountain of accomplishments, her assured legacy, the envy of any artist, unwilling to give up her right to see tomorrow. Plus, she was curious and dwelling again, for the first time in ages, about how the story might in fact come to an end. Her eyes went from the blade to the face of the wielder.
Agreed,
she said, heaving herself from the clawed chair. The great author shuffled through the darkened kitchen, shadowed closely by Billy, who trained the beam of his Freudian flashlight ahead of them. Shelby followed him, with Robert sullenly trailing behind. Charlotte retrieved an old metal lantern from a hook on the wall and lit the candle inside with practiced ease. She opened a suspiciously inconspicuous door, which to all appearances was a bookshelf but revealed a dim stone stairway leading down to the depths below.
"I'll have no tricks, lady."
Billy's voice was full of forced machismo, but his eyes went nervously from the darkness beyond the stairs to Shelby, seeking reassurance.
"Oh, but it's all a trick,"
Charlotte said, carefully descending, holding aloft the flickering lantern with one gnarled hand and placing the other on the wall for support.
"That's what writing is. You know, it's a trick, something akin to magic."
Their feet were anxious whispers on the stone steps as they made their way downward.
"A magician makes a dove transform into a bouquet of flowers. He turns his beautiful assistant into a puff of smoke. He shows you something that isn't really there. The writer does the same thing, if she's good enough. A word is nothing, scratch marks off paper, but it becomes a picture in the mind of the reader. Slightly different for all of them, but somehow universal too. Take something relatively easy, like a cat, for instance. Upon reading that word, the cat I imagine is likely not the cat that you imagine, but they are both cats, and thus the story may progress. It's all a trick. Do you understand?"
Billy growled.
"I understand that you better start making sense real quick, old lady."
"But people, they always want to know,"
Charlotte continued, unperturbed by his anger.
"Where do the ideas come from? Where on earth do you get your ideas, they say. Honestly, if I rubbed a genie's lamp tomorrow, my first wish would be to remove that damnable question from the lexicon of humanity. The truth, of course, is there's no single correct answer."
They came, at last, to the bottom of the stairs and stood together in a small room. Dirt floor strewn with hay. The lantern and flashlight did their best to fight back a darkness that probed them with eager, inquisitive tendrils. The air was dry and cold, smelled of dust and dirt, and something sickly sweet, like overly ripe or rotting fruit.
Writing is a trick, as I said, a pretense,"
Charlotte explained.
"but the initial idea, that's the truly magic part of storytelling, and that, I'm afraid, cannot be so easily explained away. Subject a dozen writers to the atrocious query and you'll get a dozen different answers. As for myself..."
She lifted the lantern to cast a wash of light over the stout wooden door set into the rough clay wall at the far end of the room.
I get my best ideas in there."
The aged scribe walked quickly to the door, leaving the uneasy trio to scamper after her, realizing only in their rush their sudden terror at the idea of being separated from Charlotte, intense feeling of dread taking a hold of them. She lifted from around her neck a chain, upon which dangled a large, corroded key.
My, it was all so easy at first. She came to me when I was a little girl. I was a sickly, lonely child, and books were my only friends for a very long time. They're still my only friends, I suppose. Then, one day, my muse came to me and told me how I might write my own stories. With her by my side, anything seemed possible. And so, that's what we did.
Charlotte pushed the key into the weathered, rusty lock.
Oh, it wasn't a sure thing,
she said.
The fame and the notoriety, even with so clever and productive a muse working tirelessly, and all the fame and desire in the world to be great, they were not a certainty. But we kept at it and we worked hard, she providing the ideas and me the presentation, the illusions, the tricks. And eventually we got better, then we got even better still. Looking back, it all seems to have gone by very, very quickly indeed.
She forced the key to turn. The lock's innards groaned at the effort. Finally, it gave a booming, decisive click, and the door swung ajar.
It was all a success, I think,
Charlotte said quietly.
That's what made us so hungry for more.
Her hand reached out to push open the heavy door. Beyond it, inside a smaller chamber, the muse perched on a pile of soiled hay. Its grotesque figure was revealed in the hellish red glow of light cast by 2 dusty lanterns, both strung on lengths of chain that dangled from the raftered ceiling, itself resting unseen somewhere in the impenetrable blackness above the monstrous muse.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
Billy gagged.
Oh, ma'am, I don't like this,
Robert cried pathetically.
Quiet, and quit your yapping,
Shelby said.
What the hell is that?
My muse,
Charlotte shrugged.
Well, what's left of her anyway?
Vaguely human in construct, the beast was white as a wedding cake's frosting, its head and body completely hairless like that of a naked mole rat. She was also enormously fat. Her belly hung pendulously down over 2 short stick legs, surely useless, jutting out at odd angles from below the folds. Her arms were incongruously long and bony, with an extra joint between shoulder and elbow that allowed them to bend and twist into insane angles. On each wrist was a thick manacle, attached by chains to mounts on the walls. At the center of the misshapen mound of flesh that was the thing's head, a small, furious face was squashed into a permanent and painful scowl. Fat lips, slick with saliva, pouted and pursed, and from between which came increasingly frantic whines and gurgles. Eventually, the crowd cowering in the doorway noticed its cold, beady eyes alighted and penetrating their gaze.
Oh, greetings, old girl.
Charlotte entered the thing's lair, lantern held high. The muse, after recoiling momentarily, began to claw the air, endeavoring to reach out and seize the woman, but Charlotte was in charge. She knew the beast's confines would curtail any attempts at revenge. Scattered about the floor were sheets of yellowed paper, wrinkled and smeared with dirt and what smelled like excrement. Groaning at the effort, Charlotte bent to pick up the nearest. She smoothed it flat against her thigh and held the page close to the lantern so as to better make out the jumbled primitive writing scrawled upon it.
She used to be so good,
the old woman said.
Now I'm lucky to get 2 or 3 pages worth of decent plot each month out of her.
Charlotte carefully kicked at an empty liquor bottle, sending it rolling away to clink gently as it struck another. Several more were scattered about the room, along with hundreds of crinkled candy wrappers, blanketing the ground like an autumn's worth of fallen leaves. Gnawed and half-shredded tabloid magazines had collected in the room's corners, mutilated faces of smiling stars. Gossip, eagerly devoured, quite literally.
I gave her just about everything she ever wanted.
Charlotte's voice was thin and sad.
And she still won't tell me how the story ends.
Turning back to the door and the 3 disturbed trespassers, she said,
So, please explain to me how in the hell I'm supposed to tell you.
She walked slowly out of the room, careful to avoid tripping on any bottle or litter, knowing full well that a fall at her age just would not do. Charlotte's intruders parted slightly in silence, distractedly letting her pass.
Maybe it's as you said, young lady. Perhaps I spoiled her, being too permissive. Oh, we used to be quite diligent, she and I. Look at her now. Bloated and lazy and halfway simple. And I must admit that my own work habits haven't exactly been rigorous, especially these last 10 or 20 years. Maybe greatness does indeed require a firmer hand.
Shelby's face was set with grim, inflexible determination.
Mrs. Hopkins, I don't understand any of this, and you know what? I don't care to. Go on, Billy, make that disgusting thing tell us how the story ends.
The big man looked at her with raised eyebrows.
Go on,
she insisted.
We come this far, ain't we?
Billy muscled up, gripping his gargantuan flashlight harder.
Oh, you can't threaten my muse into productivity.
Charlotte smirked.
Believe me, I tried. How do you think she got tied up down here in the first place?
You may be a great writer, Mrs. Hopkins, but I can't imagine you know much about persuasion.
Shelby leaned over and kissed Billy's cheek, nibbling lightly at his ear.
My Billy here is a master.
The old woman thought probably it was Shelby herself who was the black belt persuader, but said nothing.
You go in with him, Robbie. You help, go on. No way.
The only one of the three still wearing his pantyhose mask, Robert shook his head vehemently.
I ain't going nowhere near it, ma'am. You'll go where I say, young man.
Shelby's arm shot out and her hand found the back of her younger son's head.
Now, get in there.
Robbie dutifully trudged after Billy, who was inside already, eager to please. The muffled sounds of their voices were followed almost immediately by shrieking wails and rattling chains. The cries and shouts echoed in the cramped subterranean chamber as, by the warm light of Charlotte's lantern, the two women eyed each other.
It won't work,
Charlotte said.
They'll never get it out of her that way.
You don't know my Billy, Shelby sneered.
He always does whatever I tell him.
The deafening screams grew more frantic even as the chains ceased to rattle.
Oh, I'm sure he does.
Charlotte smiled wistfully.
And I do know Billy. I've known about 100 Billies of my own, maybe even more over the years. They're quite useful. Some are even fun for a little while at the least. But you and I both know that they have, inherent, shall we say, limitations.
What are you trying to say, old woman?
I'm saying that you're about to fail both of your sons.
The cries faded to weak croaks and raspy gurgles. Shelby brandished her knife, a toothy shark smile spreading over her face.
When we're finished, I'm gonna cut you into teeny tiny pieces for that comment.
Over her shoulder she called,
How's it going in there?
A sickly moan leaked listfully from behind the partially closed door.
I said, how's it going in there? Billy? Billy, you answer me!
Charlotte said reflexively.
Did any of them look like you? You know, the girls that your son brutalized.
You bitch.
Shelby hissed. Turning, she stalked away, shoved open the door and stormed inside.
Now, what exactly is going on in here?
Her voice shrank, shriveled and died in her throat. Shelby had time to stand frozen, registering the grisly scene before her. The mutilated corpse of Billy, chest split open, innards spilling forth in a gory wave, and her baby boy, skinny little Robbie, held almost lovingly in the skeletal arms of the muse, its bulbous head bent to his neck, the unspeakable sounds of chewing and slurping echoing in the silence, before being shocked back into motion by the slamming of the door behind her. Shelby whirled, throwing herself against the thick wood, pummeling it with furious fists. But the ancient door held, sound and immovable as the certainty of death itself. She screeched curses and screamed her throat raw as she savaged her nails and shredded the skin of her hands, trying to free herself from that dreadful dungeon. Softly, Charlotte's voice found her, faint and muffled, as if coming from far away.
I told you that I gave my muse just about everything she ever wanted,
the author said.
But there was one thing she loved most of all. Eventually, I just couldn't live with providing it anymore. I'd already let her have too many of my lovers and too many of my so-called friends. I'd hoped we would be okay here if we were just left alone. If we weren't hurting anyone but ourselves with our little indulgences. She deteriorated far more quickly than I imagined. Perhaps we both did, but I was content in my decline. Understand, I was unwilling to sacrifice even one more person to find out how our story ended. I was satisfied to expire not knowing. And then you came along, you and your demands. And I found that, despite what I'd long believed about myself, I actually did want to know, if the price was right, of course. And that's where you three became a blessing in disguise.
Shelby pounded her bleeding fists weakly against the door. She paused, suddenly hearing the chains clinking and clanking behind her, an excited shuffling and heavy breathing getting ever closer.
You turned out to be exactly what I needed.
The smile was audible in Charlotte's voice.
And that's twice tonight you've surprised me, my dear.
Shelby forced herself to turn, back flattened against the door, willing herself to be anywhere but there. She saw the muse's impossibly long, gangly arms reaching for her. They seemed to stretch as she watched, bones popping and creaking as they elongated, extending ever closer. Suddenly, the chains were drawn tight, forcing the creature to stop just before its ragged fingernails could graze her flesh. From somewhere in the blackness above fell a heavy bound object, a stack of blank paper tied with twine. It struck the floor and bounced onto Billy's body, drawing the muse's attention. A hideous smile pulled at the corners of its shiny, slug-like lips.
As for you,
the unseen author said,
I'll expect an outline at the very least when I come and tidy up for you later, and daily progress after that. We've kept our patient readers waiting for far too long, don't you agree?
Shelby's weakening but guttural screams followed Charlotte as she climbed the stone stairs. That is, until she reached the kitchen and closed the upper door, smothering the pesky disturbance to silence. She forced her exhausted body back to her writing desk, collapsing into her favorite chair, and breathed a long, weary sigh. The first inklings of grey pre-dawn were leaking through the lace-curtained windows, but Charlotte noted there were still plenty of stars in the sky. Tonight she had done a tad more than just sit behind her idle typewriter. Charlotte grasped unthinkingly for the half-full jug of wine hidden in the lower drawer, but stopped short. No, she thought, that's quite enough of that. She reached out, slid the bottom drawer shut, closed the golden box of cigars, and pulled her trusty typewriter close. It's time to get back to work, the great author told herself, stretching her gnarled fingers out on the keys. Long past time to buckle down and get serious for at least one more grand literary trick, one last transformation.
You know, I think she's right,
she whispered aloud.
Greatness. It really does require a firmer hand.
Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Steve Taylor, reminding you that if you haven't already, don't forget to cast your vote for this contestant via either a thumbs up or a thumbs down vote. New entries will be posted throughout this month. Be sure to tune in and vote for each of them and help decide who becomes the next evil idol. Until next time, turn off the lights and turn on the dark.
Chilling tales for dark nights.